Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Picture this, a world kind of emerging from shadow. We often talk about a period labeled the Dark Ages, right? A time where these powerful Bronze Age civilizations just crumbled.
Right. Living behind a landscape of, well, mystery, dissolution, and a whole lot of uncertainty.
But what if I told you that out of that exact darkness, something really vibrant, really ingenious happened? A kind of rebirth.
Not just picking up the pieces, but fundamentally reinventing itself. A society laying the groundwork for, the dazzling glory of classical Greece that we all think of.
Exactly. It's such a profound story, isn't it? Societal resilience, transformative innovation.
It really is. Because after that widespread collapse, the Mycan and Minos civilizations, around 1100 BC, the Greek world genuinely went through this period of deep fragmentation. Socially, economically, politically, it was chaos.
But then, remarkably, from about 800 down to 500 BC, we see this amazing resurgence.
And it wasn't just recovery, that's the key thing. It was a complete reimagining of what it meant to be Greek, how you organize a society, how you interact with the wider world. A total reboot, almost.
Absolutely. And that's precisely our mission for this deep dive today. We are plunging headfirst into the archaic period of ancient Greece, those crucial 3 centuries, 800 to 500 BC.
The foundational bedrock, you could say the genesis, really, where the building blocks of Greek civilization were not just, found again, but properly laid and forged anew.
And we're talking primarily about 2 absolutely monumental developments here. First, the revolutionary emergence and evolution of the city-states of Polis. And second, this extensive, almost explosive period of Greek colonization that just fundamentally reshaped the entire Mediterranean.
And what's so fascinating is how these two things, the internal restructuring into these unique political entities and the outward push, the expansion, they weren't separate.
Right.
Intrinsically linked. Exactly. 2 sides of the same coin, you could say. They reinforced each other, shaped the very essence of what it meant to be Hellenic or Greek.
Okay, so what can you expect as we navigate this remarkable period? Well, we're going to pull back the curtain, reveal that complex journey of how these diverse, scattered communities managed to unify themselves into distinct, self-governing political entities, each with its own character and ambitions.
And we'll dig into the how and why the Greeks spread their influence so far and wide, putting down these enduring roots across the Mediterranean and the Black Sea worlds.
And crucially, we'll uncover the profound social, economic, and cultural transformations that happened during these centuries. Transformations that absolutely set the stage for everything that came later. The philosophers, the playwrights, the democratic ideals, the architectural marvels we admire as classical Greece.
And this really brings up an important question. Why should this period, which often gets seen as just a sort of warm-up act, why does it matter to you today?
Good question. It's easy to overlook it.
Well, the very concepts we grapple with daily, things like structured citizenship, the first real stirrings of democratic thinking, the complexities of cross-cultural exchange, the challenges of adapting to new environments, they all have their deep roots right here in the Archaic period.
So it's not just dusty old history.
Not at all. It's a really compelling story of human innovation, adaptation, the drive to redefine society after a collapse. And that narrative still resonates powerfully today, doesn't it? Understanding it helps us grasp that long arc of civilizational development, how these profound shifts actually begin.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's jump right into part 1. The rebirth. The emergence and evolution of the polis. This transformation going from scattered, maybe vulnerable villages to these cohesive, self-governing city-states. It really defined the Archaic period, didn't it? Set Greece on its unique path.
Indeed. And the context here is just absolutely crucial. As we mentioned, coming out of the Dark Ages, roughly 1100 to 800 BC.
A time of real dissolution after the Bronze Age collapse.
Exactly. Mycenaean, Minoan civilizations gone. The Greek world was in disarray. Population centers shrank. Trade networks just fractured. Writing even disappeared for a while. But then, around 800 BC, we see this remarkable phase of recreation, of structuring.
Rebuilding itself.
Rebuilding, but into something new. Not the old forms, but these unique political units, new cultural identities, new economic structures. It wasn't bouncing back. It was a fundamental reimagining of community life and governance.
And central to that reimagining was this fascinating concept, the polis. Now, when we hear polis, it's easy for us today to just think city, right?
Mm.
A bunch of buildings, people living together.
Hmm.
But you're saying it was much, much more than that. What was a polis exactly? How did it reshape Greek identity?
That's such a vital distinction. A polis was far more than just an urban center. It was a comprehensive political, social, and economic unit. It included both the fortified city itself, the Ossiu, and its surrounding rural territory, the farmland, the Kora.
So the city and the countryside together.
Exactly. Think of it as a single, unified state. The urban core and the agricultural hinterland were totally linked, economically interdependent, governed by the same laws, same political structures.
Right.
And what we see happening in the early Archaic period is this slow, steady process called synokismos, literally dwelling together. Smaller villages, scattered settlements in an area start to coalesce, to merge, forming these larger, more organized city-states.
So unifying those smaller communities was key to reorganizing after the Dark Ages.
It was the central element. It provided stability, security, a shared sense of community in a way scattered villages just couldn't.
So it wasn't just about people living physically closer, but forging a new shared political identity, a common purpose, a single government system.
Precisely. And at the heart of that system was the concept of citizenship. But a very particular and often pretty limited definition of citizenship, wasn't it?
Who got to participate?
Well, the fundamental dynamic of the polis was the participation, direct or indirect, of free citizens in local governance, legal affairs, even religious duties. This participation was the bedrock.
A big shift from earlier monarchies or empires.
Huge. The polis was built on the idea that its citizens had a stake, a voice, a role. The demos, the people, weren't just subjects. They were, in theory at least, active participants, revolutionary for its time.
But maybe not direct democracy as we picture it.
Not usually, no, but it was a system where free men had a recognized role in public life, and that fostered a profound sense of civic responsibility, loyalty to their specific polis.
And this is absolutely crucial. We need to be really clear about who is left out. That citizen participation wasn't universal. Far from it.
Absolutely. A critical point for a balanced view. To avoid, romanticizing archaic Greece, slaves, women, and medics, these were resident foreigners, often skilled artisans or traders. They were explicitly excluded from political rights.
No voting, no holding office, no say in the assembly.
None of that. It was a fundamental limitation. However, and this is just as important, despite being excluded from formal politics, they played absolutely vital roles in the economy and the social fabric of the polis.
Right, they weren't just bystanders.
Not at all. Slaves did much of the really hard labor farming, mining that the economy depended on. Women managed households, raised the next generation, performed crucial religious rituals that maintained social order. And medics were essential for trade, manufacturing, bringing in diverse skills and connections.
So overlooking their contributions gives a skewed picture.
A very narrow and inaccurate one. They were integral, even without political voice or property rights.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got this fundamental unit, the polis, emerging, unifying settlements, defining a new, limited form of citizen participation. But it wasn't a cookie-cutter model, was it? You mentioned hundreds of polis emerged, each unique.
Exactly. While the basic structure was the polis self-governing city-state plus territory, the internal workings, the values, the political systems, they varied wildly. Incredible diversity.
A tapestry of different societal experiments.
That's a great way to put it. And this diversity is what makes the Archaic period so rich. Let's look at some key examples that really illustrate this divergence.
Let's start with the big one, Athens. The name everyone connects with, democracy. But back in the Archaic period, it wasn't quite there yet, was it? What was its initial path?
No, not at all what we picture as Athenian democracy. Athens initially had a firmly aristocratic system. Power was concentrated in the hands of a few noble families, the Eupatridae. They owned most of the good land, held the key political jobs like the archonship, dominated the powerful council, the Areopagus.
So ruled by the elite.
Pretty much. But this system wasn't static. Over time, you get growing social unrest, significant economic inequality, lots of small farmers falling into crushing debt, often forced to sell their land, even themselves or their families, into debt slavery.
Wow, debt slavery, that's harsh.
Extremely. And this spurred increasingly urgent demands from the general populace, the demos, for more rights, for a say in how things were run. And here's where it gets really interesting.
The struggle begins.
Yes. This struggle for rights and representation, fueled by economic hardship and the sheer indignity of debt bondage, led Athens down its unique, gradual path towards democracy. It wasn't a sudden revolution, but a series of reforms, compromises, often hard-won over decades. And it truly began right here in the Archaic period.
So internal pressure was the key driver there. Now, let's swing completely the other way. Sparta. The image is just pure military machine, right? A society obsessed with war.
Sparta, down in the Peloponnese region, yes, it presented a model almost diametrically opposed to Athens. Their entire society was meticulously built on extreme military discipline, a super rigid social order, collective identity over any individual ambition.
The Lycurgan system.
Traditionally attributed to a figure named Lycurgus, yes. It was fundamentally oligarchic, ruled by a few, and intensely militaristic. From age 7, Spartan boys were taken from their families, put into the agoge.
That brutal state training program.
Brutal is right, designed to forge them into full-time soldiers. Their whole lives revolved around military service, physical perfection, unwavering loyalty to Sparta. It wasn't a job. It was their entire identity, their purpose.
But why such an extreme focus?
Well, the primary driver, most scholars agree, was the existential need to control their huge population of helots.
Ah, the enslaved agricultural population from Messenia they conquered.
Exactly. The helots vastly outnumbered the Spartan citizens, maybe 7-1, some estimates say even more. So this constant military readiness, this iron discipline, was fundamentally about internal control, preventing helot revolts.
So what kind of society does that create?
One where individual expression, innovation, trade, art, all heavily suppressed in favor of collective military might, tradition, absolute discipline. A state built for perpetual war footing and internal security, sacrificing personal liberty and cultural richness.
A world away from Athens. Okay, then there's Corinth. We keep hearing about Corinth as a trade and sea power. How did that economic strength give them political clout?
Corinth is a fascinating third model. A prime example of a polis leveraging its amazing geography and economic power for political influence. It sat right on the isthmus, that narrow land bridge connecting the Peloponnese to mainland Greece.
Controlling land routes.
And crucially, 2 major ports. One on the Saronic Gulf facing east, one on the Corinthian Gulf facing west. This double access let them dominate trade, especially seafaring.
So unlike Athens heading towards democracy or Sparta focusing on military.
Corinth focused on wealth generation. Through its busy ports, extensive trade networks, production of highly sought-after pottery and bronze goods, this allowed its ruling elites, first aristocrats, later an oligarchy, to maintain a powerful position.
And they invested in infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
Like the Diolkos.
Yes. That paved trackway allowing ships to be dragged across the isthmus. Genius. It avoided the dangerous trip around the Peloponnese, sped up trade dramatically, and cemented their control.
So economic power translated directly into political influence.
Absolutely. Their wealth let them afford bigger armies, strong navies. It gave them considerable leverage in dealing with other polis. They could dictate terms, form alliances, found incredibly prosperous colonies like Syracuse and Sicily. It showed that economic muscle was becoming a decisive force in the archaic world, reshaping the political map.
Fascinating how different priorities shaped them.
Mm-hmm.
And quickly, 2 others often mentioned, Thebes and Delphi.
Right. Thebes, in central Greece, also rose steadily during this time, became a significant military and political power in its region, Boeotia, had a strong hoplite army, often jockeyed for influence with Athens and Sparta. Its importance would only grow.
And Delphi. Not a military power, but hugely influential.
Hugely. Delphi wasn't powerful in the usual sense, but it was arguably the crucial religious and cultural center for the entire Greek world, home to the Temple of Apollo and its famous oracle, the Pythia.
People came from all over to consult the oracle.
Rulers, ordinary people, entire city-states. They sought divine guidance on everything from personal matters to declaring war or founding a new colony, which raises that key question. How did religious authority intersect with political power?
Yeah, how did that work?
The oracle's pronouncements, often cryptic, held immense sway. They influenced politics, military campaigns, even the direction of colonization. This gave Delphi's priests a unique, almost universal influence that transcended normal political power. It was a unifying spiritual force, helping foster a sense of Pan-Hellenic identity, a shared Greekness.
Incredible. The spiritual capital shaping the whole region. Okay, so we've seen the diversity among polis. Let's look inside them now. Social strata and the seeds of reform. Let's just quickly reiterate. Who was a citizen and what did that mean?
Right. As we touched on, citizenship was mainly for free men, adult males born of citizen parents, and it wasn't just a label. It came with real privileges, political participation rights, the ability to own property, especially land, and crucial legal protection under the polis's laws. A very distinct and valued status.
But even among those citizens, it wasn't an equal playing field, was it? There were definite divisions.
Not at all. Society was highly stratified. At the top, you had the aristocrats, the eupatridae in Athens, the homoioi, or equals in Sparta. Early on, they dominated through land ownership, heredity, religious roles, military leadership, often the cavalry.
And below them.
Wealthy landowners, maybe not noble, but had done well. Then the small landowners, the backbone farmers, often struggling especially with debt. And then the lower class, the demos, owning little land, maybe artisans, laborers, rowers for the fleet. This stratification, especially the economic gap, was a constant source of friction.
That sounds like a recipe for tension, especially with the economic hardship we mentioned in Athens. No wonder it led to a drive for change.
Exactly. As the Archaic period went on, these rising social tensions fueled by debt, inequality, the growing demands of ordinary people for, say, created instability. And this pressure cooker eventually led to significant political reforms, especially later in the period, as states tried to find stability.
And some of these reforms were truly transformative. Let's talk about the key ones, starting with Draco's laws in Athens, 7th century BC.
Draco's laws around 621 BC were a crucial first step, even if a brutal one, towards a more formal legal system. Before him, laws were often unwritten, interpreted by aristocrats, leading to perceived bias.
So Draco wrote them down.
His great contribution was codification, writing them down, making them public. That brought some certainty, transparency, a basic rule of law instead of just the rule of men.
But they were harsh, right? Draconian.
Notoriously harsh. Severe penalties, often death, even for minor things. But what did written laws mean for power? It meant justice wasn't only in the hands of the powerful few anymore. Theoretically, it applied more uniformly, even if brutally. A foundational shift, however unforgiving.
Harsh, but maybe necessary groundwork. Then came Solon's reforms in 594 BC. That sounds like a real turning point for Athens.
Monumental. Solon, a respected statesman, poet, was made archon with special powers to fix the escalating crisis. He tackled the crippling debt slavery head-on with the Sysakthia, the shaking off of burdens.
How did that do?
Abolished debt slavery completely, freed those who'd fallen into it. A radical, humane move stopping citizens losing freedom over economics. He also recategorized society by wealth, not just birth. 4 classes based on agricultural output.
So rights and duties spread more broadly.
Yes, varying levels of political rights and military obligations for each class. And crucially, he boosted the power of the public assembly, the ecclesia, giving more citizens a voice, and set up the Heliaia, a popular court for appeals.
It's fascinating how economic hardship directly sparked political innovation there.
Solon saw that without economic stability for the many, political stability was impossible. His reforms were truly the first decisive stage on Athens' unique road to democracy, a precedent for citizen involvement and legal fairness.
That's a direct link. Now contrast that sharply with Lycurgus' laws in Sparta, a totally different reform philosophy.
Completely different. Lycurgus' laws probably developed over time. Not one guy pushed Sparta towards rigid military and social regulation, the Great Retra, clearly defined classes. The homoioi citizens, the Pyrrhikoi free non-citizens doing trade, and the Helots farming serfs.
And mandated military life for citizens.
Total dedication from age 7 to 60, no room for individualism, wealth, private life outside state service. Communal meals, simple clothes, no gold or silver.
So how did these differing reforms shape Athens and Sparta?
Athens moved towards shared governance for free males, individual expression, intellectual pursuits. Sparta solidified an authoritarian, collectivist military state focused on discipline, internal control over helots, and military supremacy above all else. 2 profoundly different visions of a polis.
Like watching 2 grand, competing experiments unfold. So what was the overall impact of all these varied reforms across Greece?
Ultimately, despite the huge differences, they generally increased internal stability. By addressing grievances like in Athens or enforcing rigid order like in Sparta, they reduced the risk of civil war. And collectively, they laid the groundwork for free citizens' political participation, defining their role even if it varied hugely. This era fundamentally shaped how Greeks thought about governance and community for centuries, building the scaffolding for the classical period.
Okay, so while the polis were forming and reforming inside, something huge was happening outside, that great expansion. Let's shift to the Great Expansion, Greek colonization. Why, after all this internal focus, did Greeks suddenly start heading out west and east, founding new settlements far away? What drove this?
This massive expansion, really kicking off mid-8th century BC, continuing strong through the 6th, was driven by a complex mix of factors, often tangled together. The biggest, most immediate driver, rapid population growth.
Too many people.
Exactly. After the Dark Ages, Greece saw a demographic boom, but the arable land on the mainland was limited, often mountainous. This created immense population pressure, real land scarcity. It got harder and harder to feed everyone. They desperately needed new land.
Makes sense. A primary need.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just survival, right? There was an economic pull, too.
Absolutely. Beyond just needing farmland, there was the powerful lure of economic opportunity. Archaic Greece saw a big resurgence in Mediterranean trade. Greeks were actively looking for new resources, new markets.
What kind of resources?
Things scarce back home: metals, iron, copper, tin vital for tools, weapons, timber for shipbuilding, new sources of food, especially grain. These new colonies became vital hubs for getting these goods, forging new trade routes, expanding commerce. The search for wealth, for markets for their own pottery and wine, for strategic trade spots, a powerful motivator.
And maybe a political element, too, escaping internal problems.
Definitely played a role. Political tensions, instability back in the mother city. The metropolis certainly pushed some people out. If you were on the losing side of a political fight, unhappy with aristocratic rule, or just trying to escape that crushing debt, starting fresh elsewhere looked appealing.
A safety valve, maybe?
Sometimes deliberately used that way. A metropolis might send out a colony to get rid of a discontented faction or establish a strategic trade post. It was a chance for a new beginning, often with the mother city's blessing, even support.
So this pressure population resources forced a shift away from everyone just being a farmer.
Precisely. In the growing urban centers, not everyone could be a farmer. It necessitated a shift towards non-agricultural work: crafts, manufacturing, trade, seafaring. Colonization wasn't just an opportunity, it was an economic imperative to diversify, provide livelihoods. It fostered a real entrepreneurial spirit.
And these new colonies, they didn't just sever ties with home, did they? Sounds like connections remained important.
Oh, absolutely crucial. They maintained diligent economic and cultural ties with the mother polis. The founding itself was ritualized. An oikist, a leader, was chosen, often after consulting Delphi. He'd carry a sacred flame from the home city's hearth to light the new colony's hearth. Symbolism of continuity.
So trade, shared religion, language.
All kept those ties strong. A powerful sense of shared Hellenic identity. The mother city often provided settlers, support, saw the colony as an extension of its influence, a source of future wealth. The relationship was complex, sometimes supportive, sometimes competitive, but always there.
Okay, so given all that, where did they actually go? Let's look at Greek footprints across the map. This was a really significant spread, wasn't it?
Truly vast and transformative. Across the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, it wasn't just a few scattered outposts, it was a major strategic wave of settlement, fundamentally driven by that need for land and resources.
You give us some examples, especially in the West. Magna Graecia, right?
Magna Graecia. Great Greece, yes. Southern Italy and Sicily became so densely packed with Greek colonies. Think of Syracuse, founded by Corinth, became one of the most powerful cities in the Greek world, period. Sybaris, famous for luxury. Croton, known for athletes. These weren't small posts. They were full-fledged cities replicating home structures.
And beyond Italy and Sicily.
Colonies along the east coast of Spain, southern coast of France, Massalia, modern Marseille, founded by Phocians, became a huge trade hub for goods from Gaul and Iberia. Vital gateways to new resources and markets.
And the Black Sea region was important too, especially for grain.
Absolutely. The Pontus Euxinus, the hospitable sea, colonized all around its coastline, driven largely by the search for grain, timber, fish, metals. Key settlements like Byzantium, future Constantinople, modern Istanbul, founded by Megara, controlling the vital Bosporus Straits. Trapezus on the southeast coast, trading with inland Anatolia. Resource extraction and trade conduits.
And even North Africa saw some Greek settlement.
Yes, though maybe less extensively. Cyrene, founded by Thera in modern Libya, is the big example. Very fertile region, known for a unique plant, silphium, highly prized. And while Carthage nearby was Phoenician, Greek colonies like Cyrene had significant, if sometimes competitive, trade relations with them and other local North African peoples. Shows the complex interactions of the time.
This expansion was clearly about so much more than just land. It reshaped everything. Let's dig into beyond territory, social and economic dimensions of colonization. What were the deeper impacts?
Well, these colonies became absolutely vital centers for trade and seafaring. They formed this intricate web connecting the entire Greek world, not just places to dump excess population, but dynamic hubs in an expanding commercial network, facilitated exchange between Greeks, indigenous peoples, other powers like Phoenicians, Etruscans, led to an explosion in shipping, new routes, specialized merchant fleets.
Implying a constant flow, a two-way street between the homeland and the colonies.
Precisely. Constant cultural and economic exchange. Not just exporting Greekness, but a continuous dialogue. Ensured that shared Hellenic identity language, religion, customs, but also allowed colonies to develop their own local distinctiveness. They adapted, incorporated local elements, even innovated. Greek, yes, but with their own flavor, a diverse Hellenic world.
And politically, did they stay under the thumb of the mother city, or did distance breed independence?
That's the key question, isn't it? How did distance affect governance? While initial ties were strong, new political structures often developed independently. The mother city's influence could become quite limited, especially as colonies grew wealthy and powerful.
So they became self-governing.
Effectively, yes. Often founded reflecting the metropolis's system, democracy, oligarchy, but local circumstances, economic interests, dealings with neighbors could lead them down independent paths. They made their own laws, alliances, sometimes even fought their mother city, proud of their lineage, but charting their own course.
Makes sense. Distance fosters independence. Now, a melting pot. Cultural impacts of colonization. Obviously, Greek culture spread, but was it just a one-way street? Or more of a synthesis?
The most direct impact, undeniably, was the spread of Greek culture Hellenization. Language, political ideas, art, religion, architecture, athletics, they took it all with them.
So things like shared rituals, festivals, gods, these would have been common across this network.
Absolutely. Religious rituals, pan-Hellenic festivals like the Olympics, shared artistic styles, they created a cohesive cultural sphere, fostered that sense of being Greek, Hellenes, despite political fragmentation. A Greek from Syracuse and a Greek from Athens shared a cultural language.
But you use the term melting pot. That suggests interaction, not just export.
And that's what's fascinating. They weren't settling empty lands. They interacted extensively with Phoenicians, Etruscans, Sicilians, Scythians, others. It wasn't a one-sided imposition. While Greek culture was often dominant, there was frequently a dynamic cultural synthesis.
So give and take.
Exactly. Indigenous peoples adopted and adapted Greek elements. And Greek colonists sometimes incorporated local customs, art motifs, religious practices, even food. This mutual exchange enriched both sides, led to new hybrid forms, a more vibrant Mediterranean world, shows cultures aren't static. They evolve through contact.
Much more complex than simple expansion. Okay, let's zoom in on daily life, the fabric of life, economy and society in archaic Greece. Agriculture was still the foundation, right?
Absolutely. Despite trade and cities growing, agriculture remained the fundamental livelihood for most people. The economy was overwhelmingly agrarian. Land ownership was the main source of wealth and status. Daily life followed the farming seasons.
And technology helped here. Iron tools made a difference.
A huge difference. The widespread use of iron was crucial. Stronger iron plows, hoes, sickles were way more effective than bronze, allowed cultivating tougher soils, clearing land better, increasing output, essential for feeding growing populations and creating surpluses for trade. A quiet revolution in farming.
And what were the main crops they relied on?
Staples were cereals, wheat, and barley for bread, but olives and grapes were also cultivated extensively, becoming iconic symbols of Greek farming prosperity.
And olive oil and wine weren't just for home use, I imagine. Big trade item.
Precisely. They became key cash crops. Olive oil for cooking, lighting, hygiene, ritual, wine, integral to social and religious life. Both stored and transported relatively easily, highly valued across the Mediterranean. This specialization shows their growing economic sophistication and links to wider trade networks, agriculture feeding commerce.
Speaking of commerce, let's turn to highways of the sea, trade and seafaring. Sounds this trade exploded alongside colonization.
Two sides of the same coin, definitely. Maritime trade flourished directly because of colonization. Colonies were markets for Greek goods and sources for raw materials. The sea became the main highway for almost all significant economic activity, saw huge advances in shipping, navigation, vast trade routes.
And Corinth keeps popping up here. Its location was key.
Absolutely key. That isthmus location connecting two seas made it a natural hub. They developed sophisticated ports, the Diolkos, a powerful merchant fleet, dominated many routes. Their wealth was directly tied to mastering the sea and moving goods, arguably the top economic power for much of this period.
So what kind of stuff was being shipped around on these sea highways?
Hugely diverse. Luxury items like fine pottery Corinthian, later Athenian vases, jewelry, perfumes, showing growing wealth, essential commodities like metals, textiles, and crucially, bulk food items, especially grain from the Black Sea and Sicily, vital for feeding mainland cities that couldn't feed themselves anymore.
This boom in trade sounds great, brought wealth, diversity, but did it also deepen social inequalities?
It absolutely did. While trade created opportunities, it also widened the gap. Those controlling ships, routes, capital, skilled production, they got much richer. A new class of wealthy merchants emerged, the nautichoi, emperoi.
While small farmers struggled.
Often, yes. Or those not involved in trade, sometimes lost their land to debt. And this raises that question. How did this new mobile wealth challenge the traditional land-based aristocratic power?
Yeah, new money versus old money.
Kind of. This rising merchant class gained influence, sometimes clashing with the landed elite. This economic disparity fueled social tensions, drove reforms like Solon's in Athens, as both the newly rich and the struggling poor sought more political voice. Economic change driving political transformation.
A really dynamic interplay. Okay, moving beyond economics to bonds and beliefs, social structure and culture. How important were family and clan ties?
Paramount, especially early on, maybe even more important than loyalty to the polis itself. These extended family units, the gene, provided identity, economic support, political allegiances. Lineage was crucial for status, marriage, alliances. Your identity was rooted in your family.
And the aristocratic families, despite reforms, still held a lot of power.
Generally, yes, initially. Through land ownership mainly, the most stable wealth source, also often controlled key religious offices, military leadership. While figures like Solon shipped away and new wealth emerged, aristocratic prestige remained significant through much of the period, especially outside Athens. They were the established elite.
And religion wasn't just a private thing, was it? Sounds central to civic life.
Absolutely central, not a separate sphere. Deeply woven into social cohesion, civic identity, public festivals for the gods like the Panathenaic Games for Athena in Athens, or the big festivals at Delphi and Olympia were crucial for unity.
More than just religious rites.
Oh yeah, grand public events. Brought citizens together, reinforced shared myths, values, common identity, displayed the polis's wealth, piety, culture. Participating was part of being a citizen. Civic events as much as religious ones.
And this period also saw the real beginnings of distinct Greek art and literature.
Definitely. The seeds were sown and began to flourish. We see that distinct archaic style emerging in ceramics, sculpture, moving beyond the earlier, more rigid geometric forms. A time of intense creative experimentation, refinement, growing naturalism laid the crucial groundwork for the classical explosion.
Let's delve deeper into that now with the mind and spirit, cultural and religious developments.
Yeah.
How did they view the divine, and how did that show up in their amazing temple architecture?
They worshipped that rich pantheon, Zeus, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, many others. And in the Archaic period, their devotion really manifested physically in building increasingly sophisticated monumental temples, impressive feats of engineering and art.
And these temples were more than just places for statues. They had a civic role.
Much, much more. They were significant political, social, and economic centers. Often acted as treasuries storing city wealth, offerings, documents. Building one was a huge statement of the polis's piety, wealth, prestige. Public rituals, processions, festivals centered on them. Places of assembly, celebration, civic display, even refuge. Embodied the city spirit. Bigger temple, more prestige.
And certain sacred centers like Delphi and Olympia had influence across all of Greece.
Immense influence, shaped religious and cultural life for everyone. Unified Greeks through shared practices, pilgrimages, pan-Hellenic festivals. Delphi's oracle influenced decisions everywhere. Olympia brought Greeks together peacefully for the games, crucial for fostering that shared Hellenic identity despite political divisions. Places to meet, compete, share heritage.
Incredible how they tied things together. Now, voices of wisdom, literature, and philosophy. Homer's epics, the Iliad, the Odyssey, seem absolutely foundational.
Cannot be overstated. Even if composed earlier, they were widely circulated, memorized, recited, revered in the Archaic period, formed the educational backbone, created common myths, heroic ideals, ethical frameworks. More than stories, shared heritage, moral compass, source of identity, wisdom repository for all Greeks. provided that common language of heroism, honor, fate.
And Hesiod offered something different, more practical.
Yes, Hesiod's works and days and theogony. Works and days gave practical advice on farming, labor, ethics, emphasizing justice, hard work. Theogony systematized the gods' origins, the cosmos, a more didactic, ethical, cosmological view compared to Homer's heroics, equally important for understanding their worldview.
But here's where it gets really interesting, the birth of Western philosophy, a shift to rational inquiry.
Absolutely, the very genesis, primarily in the prosperous Ionian colonies in Asia Minor. Early philosophers, the pre-Socratics like Thales of Miletus and Anaximander, Heraclitus, started moving beyond purely mythological explanation.
Oh,
They laid the groundwork for rational inquiry, observation, logic. Thales proposed water as the fundamental element. Anaximander suggested an undefined, boundless substance. What does this mean? A revolutionary leap. From explaining the world via gods and myths to using observation, reason, seeking natural causes. The crucial first step towards scientific thought, critical inquiry, set the stage for everything after.
a profound shift. And finally, culture-wise, shaping beauty, art, and sculpture. A distinct Greek aesthetic emerges.
Yes, a significant evolution. Moving away from the rigid, abstract, geometric figures, archaic sculptures, still a bit stylized, often frontal, but show growing naturalism. The iconic Choros, male youth, and Core, female maiden statues.
With that famous archaic smile.
That enigmatic smile, yes. Show growing grasp of anatomy, capturing movement, ideal beauty, often grave markers or offerings representing youth, strength, piety.
And architecture gets its defining features, too.
Yes. Widespread adoption and standardizing of the Doric and Ionic orders. Doric, sturdy, simple capitals. Trilithmatopi frieze, think Temple of Hera at Olympia. Gravitas, strength. Ionic slender columns, volute capitals, continuous frieze, more elegant, decorative, often in East Greece. These styles laid the foundation for classical Greek building, a recognizable, harmonious tradition.
And the pottery. Often how we visualize this era.
A major achievement. Black figure, first black silhouettes on red clay, incised details, then innovative red figures left red, background painted black, allowing much more detailed expression. Not just functional items, but exquisite art depicting myths, heroes, everyday life, athletics, symposia, an invaluable window into their world. Shows incredible craftsmanship.
So with all these developments, polis, colonization, social and cultural shifts, we arrive at the foundation for greatness, transition to the classical period. By 500 BC, Greece sounds poised for something even bigger.
It really was. Around 500 BC, the end of the Archaic period, Greece had transformed. Political structures were more defined, stable, distinct governance systems, clearer polis identities, but also that broader, shared Hellenic culture binding them.
And a complex balance of power had emerged between the leading polis.
Yes, those first crucial steps towards democracy taken in Athens. A dynamic balance of military and economic power between Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes. And Greek culture and trade had spread hugely via colonization. They were a major Mediterranean force now.
But then something huge external forced their hand, forced them to unite in a new way.
That's right. The pivotal event marking the transition, forcing unprecedented cooperation, was the looming conflict with the massive Persian Empire, the Persian Wars starting around 499 BC.
And what's fascinating is how this external threat forged internal unity.
Exactly. Facing this common, powerful enemy threatening their very existence, these often rivalrous Greek states were compelled to put aside differences, form alliances, cooperate for defense, recognize their shared identity as Hellenes against the barbarians.
And this shared struggle, winning against the odds, set the stage for the classical period.
Precisely. Defeating Persia instilled profound shared pride, confidence, reinforced the idea of Hellenes. The confidence and lessons learned, especially Athens' key role and naval power, provided the impetus and resources for the Athenian Golden Age and the broader classical era, that explosion of art, philosophy, politics. The Archaic period built the foundation, the Persian Wars tested it, and strengthened it.
What an incredible journey through this often overlooked archaic period. Just to recap, we saw the revolutionary rise of the polis, that unique city-state redefining Greek life and governance.
And that explosive colonization, spreading Greek culture and influence across the Mediterranean and Black Sea, driven by need and opportunity, forging a shared Hellenic world.
And the foundational developments everywhere. Politics, with democracy's seeds, the economy, with agricultural tech and sea trade, and culture, distinct art, literature, and the very birth of philosophy that shift from myth to reason.
These archaic Greeks weren't just recovering. They were actively innovating, experimenting, building idea by groundbreaking idea, the very structure for classical Greece's enduring legacy, its philosophy, democracy, art, literature, indispensable groundwork.
So here's a final thought for you to ponder. Think about how those initial struggles and the sheer diversity within these early city-states, combined with that outward drive of colonization, created this dynamic tension. It paradoxically forged a shared Greek identity. They were fiercely independent, often fought each other, yet through shared culture, language, external threats, they saw themselves as Hellenes.
Hmm.
What can that intricate dance between fierce independence and emergent unity teach us about identity and civilization building? How vital are these foundational periods, maybe less flashy than their successors, for truly understanding the golden ages that follow?
A powerful question to consider. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the archaic Greek world, the true cradle of Greek civilization.
Until next time, keep digging deeper.